Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game SO Ding's series, The Port Authority, where I weigh some of my favorite arcade games of all time against their home console ports. And if you can't tell already, you did click on the thumbnail after all. We are comparing Ridge Racer on the Namco System 22 against Ridge Racer on the PlayStation 1. And while there is a fundamental performance difference, there's two ways to look at this Port Authority, and we'll get into both of them. But honestly, when Ridge Racer came out in arcades, it absolutely blew everyone away. It stood toe-to-toe with the best of what Sega could do in 3D hardware, as well as in the arcade racing genre. And it is one of those franchises, it's just synonymous with arcade racing, and I've loved it ever since I first played it. And if you're going to arcades back in the day when this game was brand new, when you walked in and you saw Ridge Racer on the arcade floor and you looked at the graphical fidelity and just overall how impressive this game was, it absolutely blew anything away that we had at home as far as technology was concerned. It was basically the future in action, and it is one of those massive hits for Namco. This arcade cabinet was basically everywhere all at once. If you went to an arcade in the early 90s, there was basically going to be a Ridge Racer cabinet there, maybe one, maybe two set up next to each other, but if you didn't see it, you'd really have to try to avoid it because this thing was just absolutely a 10 out of 10 hit. And as far as the graphics on display here on System 22, they look absolutely stunning. You have perspective correct textures and polygons, you have really nice bright vibrant colors, maybe not as vibrant as Sega made, but it was that Namco style, and you had excellent performance as well because this was heavy hitting 3D arcade hardware the same way that the Sega Model 2 was that heavy hitting hardware that would be so expensive it could never possibly come home in this era. I should be talking about a game console would cost multiple thousands of dollars just to put next to your television. It would be beyond even what Neo Geo was back in the day, but this was absolutely incredibly impressive when it came out. But now it's time to talk about the PlayStation 1. And honestly, even though it is a massive graphical downgrade as well as a frame rate downgrade, it is hyper impressive that they were able to get this game translated over to the PlayStation 1 hardware so early in its lifespan. This is a masterclass in how to bring a game's design and content and fun factor over to less powerful hardware and just make it still work. I can't say that this is definitely holding the line with System 22 as far as the graphical prowess is concerned, but everything else 100% translated over. I just wanted to show you guys the model of the car so you got to look at it, but honestly, Ridge Racer 100% a game you should be playing in the first person view. It helps so much with drifting. Now, of course, it is the PlayStation 1, so you can tell immediately it's running at a lower frame rate. Obviously, the textures are nowhere near as detailed or refined, and obviously the 3D is taking a downgrade, both in amount of polygons as well as the fact that you do have that lack of perspective correct texturing on the polys, and they will definitely wiggle on the sides of the screen. But that's just because that's what the PlayStation 1 hardware was known to do, and this game is just so early in the PlayStation 1 life cycle. Obviously, developers didn't really have a massive handle on how these things worked as far as the 3D hardware. This was basically being invented as they went along. Namco was one of the first developers on PlayStation 1, so you can 100% forgive it for having all of these downgrades because it is still Ridge Racer, and even though it is just basically the arcade version of the game with almost no extras here, when you first saw this thing run at home, you felt like the future was in your living room. And as we move back over to Namco System 22, it is a night and day difference as far as how the game actually renders the scene here when you finish the race, but both look incredible. Obviously, System 22 is much better and it has that higher frame rate, but you have to give Namco credit for being able to actually bring this game to PlayStation 1 in and of itself. But let's go with a side-by-side comparison before we get to the soundtrack sample. You'll see here that you do lose a few details, like your pit chief here running across the road. That's completely missing from PlayStation 1. But as far as all of the buildings, the course architecture, the layout, all of the turns, that has come over 100% from the original arcade version of the game. In some instances, that building there and the blue actually looks slightly better on PlayStation 1. Some of the colors here just hit a little bit more, and that's what we're going to be taking a look at next after the soundtrack sample. I actually kind of prefer the colors on the PlayStation 1 version of the game, but here's the soundtrack, here's the difference. First, we're going to start with PlayStation 1, then we'll move to Namco System 22, and I'll be right back to talk about the art style. Obviously you have a difference in the soundtrack because of course you have something like a CD on PlayStation 1 with Redbook audio available versus the ROM board on the System 22. But I would say both soundtracks are absolutely outstanding, and it kind of is just subjective as to which one you like better. So as far as the soundtrack is concerned, I feel like that is 100% just a push. It is up to you and deciding what you like to hear. But again, as we move into the second track in the game, because even though Ridge Racer has 3 courses, it only has 2 actual technical tracks, go ahead and look at the overall colors here on the System 22, because that's what I really want to take a look at, the overall vibe and tone of these games compared side by side. You have that nice white cloud, you've got the blue sky, and this game almost goes into a little bit of the pastel colorways in some of the buildings, kind of like a Miami vibe going on here. Not sure where this is supposed to take place, but I've always felt like it's somewhere in Florida just based on the architecture and the colors chosen for the buildings. Just has that look to it. And as we take a left here to go into the other area of the course, this game has always looked great. The color vibrancy is good. The vehicles look nice. It is one of those fun games that just absolutely has such a fun art style. And compared to Sega, Namco's games look completely different, and pretty much all of the System 22 games and even the enhancements on System 22 all had this same graphical look to them. I wouldn't say it's quite as good as Sega in the colors, but I absolutely still love it. But the thing is, when we move over to the PlayStation version in a second, I want you to think about the colors and the vibe and see how that translates over to PlayStation 1, because in some ways I actually like how it looks on PlayStation 1 better, at least in the color choice. Obviously in the amount of polygons and textures, PlayStation 1 just can't keep up, but here when we're underneath this bridge, the colors, the yellows, the oranges of that nighttime just look a little bit more fun. And obviously we're racing at night here, but you can even see in the greens of the foliage and the rocks on the side of the road, they just have a little bit more vibrancy, and I'm kind of into that. I know again it is subjective, and as we come into sunrise here, sure, you're going to get some dithering on the sky. That's what PlayStation 1 did, but I just think that these buildings pop ever so slightly more. But of course that's going to come at a cost as far as the performance is concerned. We're going to lose frame rate here in the PlayStation 1 version of the game, and we're going to lose complexity in the geometry with the polygons and all the models in the game. System 22 definitely, from start to finish, is the better game technically as far as performance and graphical fidelity are concerned. But as far as the vibe is concerned and the colors chosen, PlayStation 1 just hits more for me. Believe me, comment down below and you tell me how you feel about that. And as far as how the game controls, obviously it's going to be different on PlayStation 1, but both have a really nice feel, and both have the ability to really hone you in on the driving line, understanding the turns, and performing well. And that's the great thing about Ridge Racer. It's always been a great game as far as controls are concerned, and always has felt different compared to everything Sega did in a good way. Not to say Sega did things bad, but it is nice that these games don't really feel that much similar compared to something that Sega would have created. And it is just impressive to think that at a point in time the PlayStation 1 came home with Ridge Racer and you could play this game at home. And when you actually first saw it, you probably basically just completely forgot about how good the arcade version was, because to see this level of 3D underneath your television in your living room in the 90s would just absolutely blow you away. And of course this isn't anywhere near the capabilities and the max end of what the PlayStation 1 could do with 3D, but it was impressive as hell when we first got it. We absolutely loved it. And as we move back over to the System 22 again, it has such a unique look, but as we're underneath this roadway here, it just doesn't have that same orange glow to it. I wish it kind of had a little bit more vibrancy. But honestly, this is a very fun and interesting Port Authority, because on one end, the System 22 absolutely blows the PlayStation 1 away in every single category: frame rate, complexity in the models, the overall textures, the perspective correctness of everything. It is just quote-unquote the better version of the game, and because of course you can emulate this on MAME, you really wouldn't have to go to the PlayStation 1 version, because you have the ability to play both. Obviously if you wanted to play both on original hardware, it would take a lot to get a System 22 running in your house, but you could use MAME on one side and DuckStation on the other, and basically go and play whatever one you wanted. So that is the nice thing, you have options. But it's surprising for a port of Ridge Racer. Sure, the PlayStation 1 doesn't get anywhere near the arcade, but it's so technically impressive that it works in and of itself. It is a closer race than you would think. Believe me, comment down below and you tell me, Namco System 22 or PlayStation 1, not which one looks better, which one you would prefer to play, because I think that'll be interesting. But that's it for this Port Authority. I'll be back with more soon, but go play some Ridge Racer. See you guys next time. Bye-bye.